Right along here, Axe. That's going to bring us to 1993 and a film that was directed by the legendary horror film director George A. Romero. And this is the film The Dark Half. And a couple of interesting little facts here, of course, Axe, I like to say before we get into things. But one of the big ones here was this film was actually completed in 1991. And due to the kind of backlog of Orion Pictures and kind of running out of money, Orion was not able to produce this really until 2 years later in 93. So it was kind of sitting in limbo for a while and, completed film. But this film, X, is definitely, when I was referring to earlier, a classic take or a modern take on classic literature. This is definitely got that Jekyll and Hyde feel to it. And this kind of tells the story of this guy he's this writer, and this writer's alter ego kind of takes over his personality, and it starts kind of interfering with his everyday life, of his and there's
So, yeah, I love The Dark Half, man. The Dark Half's one of my fucking favorites because I relate to it so heavy, and for multiple reasons. It just makes me a little giddy to talk about it because, okay, so this story and this movie, for whatever reason, Stephen King chose to emphasize twins, right? Which is my sign of the Gemini. And how twins, they have this symbiosis, I guess, and how, even like telepathic communicating and all that stuff that goes along with the idea of twins is really strong in this. And I'd like to mention that if any of our listeners know what a life path number is, mine and Stephen King's are both 7. And so I've always felt like I've had this, like when I read Stephen King, sometimes it feels like I'm reading my own thoughts. It's really weird. It's like when I open up his books, and it feels so familiar, like going home again. And like you said, this is like a Jekyll and Hyde story, but it goes along with Stephen King loves the whole metaphysical realm. He really got a lot of his start, like his early work was really, with Carrie and that stuff is really about telepathy and psychic abilities. And so this is about all of that. He it just has a real spiritual sense to this movie does. And then he brings in all the folklore and stuff to spiff it up. But basically, like that's my take on it is the magic of twins, the Gemini, and how there's a light and a dark, and Jekyll and Hyde, like you said. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I love this movie though. And also, I'm a huge Elvis fan and always have been. And so, the Are You Lonesome Tonight in this is really special. And it really feels like it was made just for me.
Well, You know, for these last couple of reviews here, X, one of the things I want to kind of touch on is the symbology of some of these, aspects of these films, and one of the main things in this one is obviously the sparrows. Because this is, they're prevalent throughout the film, and there's some very, very important scenes that are, incorporated in. One of them, of course, towards the end of the film, but they.
So I really like the fucking college professor lady. That chick. I don't remember her name. But right, like
Yeah.
he goes to her and like she's the old sage that has all the answers to everything, and she goes and she looks it up in her book in the library, about the sparrows, and she finds all the folklore about it and how they supposedly bring the dead souls across to the next world, or they bring messages from that world to us, and so she's really cool with her pipe and all that shit. She really feels like she belongs in a different story altogether. Like she, like I guess she feels made up. The character feels like a made up character to me, but I really like it. I mean, she's got this quirkiness, but she brings in all of that folklore, that he's trying to figure out, what all these messages mean, and what does it all add up to.
Mm-hmm. The actor X that plays Thad Beaumont and George Stark, respectively, is Timothy Hutton. And a couple of things about Timothy Hutton, from what I understood, Timothy Hutton was very, very hard to work with during this production, and him and George Romero, like really, really early on, clashed quite a bit, and with the kind of the creative direction the film was going. And one thing about Timothy Hutton too is he was also he was a method actor, so he was very in character all the time, and he never really came out of character. So that obviously, with real life situations, when you're on set, it's a complete different ball game when you're trying to get something done or whatever. Hey, should we do this way or whatever, and so you could see how there was definitely some problems, between the director and the star of this film. Really, especially at the beginning, they were able to iron things out, to make a really, what I would say, I think this is a beautiful film. This is a great Stephen King film that it's up there. This was George Romero's actual last film that was ever shot in the city of Pittsburgh. And part of that was because of, production woes. This is, this film went through a lot, it was in limbo, as I said, for 2 years. A lot of people, probably heard about this, rumblings of this back in the day when it was, in 91 when it was completed, but just wondering if this was ever going to come out. But, it turned out to be a really, really great film.
So, and it's such an autobiographical story for Stephen King. It really feels like, when he's in his early work, when he's writing under a pseudonym, the Bachman,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Richard Bachman, and so he had this alter ego that got him started, and so George Stark is that for Stephen King, I think, and along with that came all of the addictions and problems that he had at that time. And so the Dark Half is really Stephen King coming to grips with getting sober
Exactly.
and putting to rest his demons. And to me, that's beautiful. But let's talk about that main character, because you said he's a method actor. But he's kick ass as fucking George Stark. He's just fucking kick ass.
Mm-hmm. George Stark is just absolutely brutal in this.
He is so good as George Stark.
His slayings, his killings in this are just.
But he's kind of lame as Thad, huh?
He really is, yeah.
But that's the way it's supposed to be. He's supposed to be weak and lame until the very end when he becomes the hero and he takes over. But I kind of feel like he never gets to that. He never gets to that hero status.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in the end, George Stark was a much more compelling person, a much stronger character. He should have been the one that stuck. But, that's not how Stephen King wrote it.
Right.
But the way the acting was, the acting as George Stark was so much stronger that I felt like, he kind of got the upper hand, really, in the story. Like Thad, you end up leaving this movie feeling like, Thad got away with some bullshit.
Definitely. But yeah, it just seemed like he was the perfect foil. The whole scene with the doctor, where he kills the doctor, and it just it just seemed like Stark was one step ahead of him, of Thad, throughout the whole film, and it was really
right. And it sort of has that similar feeling with Night Flyer that we just talked about, where it ends up he is his own monster that he's created.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So the Dark Half, I read it, and it's sort of a long book. But it gets into detail about the surgery that he has as a boy. To me, I always found that really interesting, is how he had these bits of his brother left over in his brain, and when they slice him open and it's got teeth, and the doctor throws up, and the birds crash through the windows of the hospital, all that is like, I just love this movie so much, and this story. I really like all of the one-liners that George Stark has, and like the whole Endsville, this is where all rail station ends. And like I said, with the Elvis and all of that is just awesome. His car is rocking, just fucking bitchin' ass car, and the Tornado, right?
Yep.
And right, and that's what it says on the back of it, right? Something hot. What does it say? Something bitch machine or something machine. High tone machine.
Yep.
High tone son of a bitch or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, and the way that he like pours the whiskey on his wound and all of that shit, like fucking guy is kick ass.
Yeah, a legit badass for sure. But yeah, so that's in a nutshell, we could probably talk for quite a while about the Dark Half, but we do have one more review to do, so let's do our ratings here for I'll let you start it off here on the Dark Half from 1993.
Well, I mean, it's George Romero and Stephen King. It's got a 4 automatic.
I completely agree. I think that you pair those two together, it's magic, and it's this is no different. I definitely this is a film that I can go on record and say I'll put it up there with Creepshow.
Yeah.
You know, but it's I'm gonna agree with you. I think it's a 4, solid 4. So there you have it. 1993 is The Dark Half. Axe and I are agreeing. We're both going 4 blood drops out of 5. So our final film this week, Axe, is a more modern film that is not really a modern film, ironically enough. So this film, Axe, is from, first of all, it's the film 1922, and it is directed by Zach Hilditch. And this was part of the Everything's Eventual collection. And before you and I went on the air today, we both kind of talked about this, and neither one of us really remembered reading this story. Obviously, both of us have read that collection. So this one kind of skipped over us a little bit. So this talks about, this story is about this farmer, obviously in 1922, who conspires to kill his wife because of these financial situations. He realizes that his wife is kind of, I don't want to say she's going underhanded on him, but because at the beginning of this film, I feel like you kind of have to feel a little bit of sympathy for this guy.
For sure.
And, because he's really getting the shaft, and so he kind of comes up with this devious plan, like really in the first few minutes of this film, like I'm gonna, the only way that we can be financially stable is if I off my wife, so he enlists the help of his son to help out with this too, and it happens, and then all of a sudden everything like really spirals out of control for this guy. Like his life, just goes to shit, really, and there's the situation with with his son and his son's girlfriend. They have issues, and there's so much internal struggle throughout this film that this guy is like really going through, and he makes this just rash decision at the beginning of the film, and it just affects him. It just it's that tumble down effect, and one big thing about this film is the I mentioned earlier when we were talking about The Dark Half as the symbology of this film, and this one is even more so because we have the symbology of rats in this film, and they are like in an abundance throughout this film, and there's this really graphic scene where the rats are eating away at the cow's udder, and there's just some really sickening, and towards the end of the film, we won't jump right to the end because we can jump back here, but let's just say this, Axe, that the rats are kind of representative of this guy's guilt. Mm-hmm. Like they are there because of what this guy did, and they are his constant reminder that he is not free. You know what I mean? And it's very, I can't say that I hated this, Axe. I didn't, I'm going to be honest with you, Axe. I didn't expect much. I really didn't. But it wasn't terrible.
Certainly not not even the worst Stephen King movie.
No, absolutely not. What'd you think, Axe?
Well, it's a modern movie, so you got that going for it. It's shot beautifully. It's got some beautiful landscape shots. If you're into corn, it'll really turn you on. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, this you got Ernest P. Worrell back from the dead. And no, for real. this guy is just like fucking Ernest P. Worrell.
He really is.
For real.
Yeah.
For the listeners that haven't seen this, yeah, the guy looks and talks just like fucking Ernest, Jim Varney, you know, and he's teamed up with this woman who is like, you know. Okay, so I do kind of relate with this movie because my parents are kind of like this story, only without the murder. Right? So my dad was like a city slicker and my mom was a country girl. You know, and she wanted the farm and he wanted the city. And so like I understand the values of both sides. You know, I grew up with cousins and aunts and uncles on both sides that, you know, I knew what it was like to, you know, go out in the field and play, and I knew what it was like to go to the mall, you know, and so it's, you know, the story is about, I don't know, it's comfort zone, I guess. Like this guy was so comfortable where he was, what he always knew, what was passed down to him, you know. And it's kind of a movie about tradition and how twisted people's traditions can get, right? And it's sort of like I don't know, like you get Stephen King talks a lot about the country people a lot, you know, obviously with Children of the Corn, you know, being the obvious one, but it's this idea that you know, the crazy Masons are in the back room doing some weird shit is basically what it boils down to in a lot of these stories. And this guy is kind of like that, where he, you know, is this hillbilly hick out in the middle of nowhere that was, you know, grew up to be a farmer and probably got beat as a kid, you know, by his drunken dad and all that bullshit, and wants to teach his kid exactly how to be like that. And and then you got this mom who probably got knocked up on accident, you know, or something, and had to marry him, which was like the case of my grandparents. You know, she was valedictorian and he was like hillbilly hick. And they didn't belong, but she got knocked up, and so they had to get married, and that's the way it was back then. And you know, so being in 1922, it was a very different world back then, and the way people conducted themselves and behaved, you know, I guess deep down we're all the same. We still feel, you know, that murderous side of us, that Cain side of us, you know, is always been there. But it's a beautiful movie because you've got all the old school cars in this, you know, and you've got you know, like the way people talk, and it's kind of got that feel of like Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft, where it's, I'm crazy and this is how I got that way. You know, the author is sitting down telling his own story. I like it. But, you know, like I'm saying, I want to get back to the son and how he was brought up to pick a side, you know. And you kind of got uptight mom and laid back dad, even though, I don't know, you seem like the dad would be more uptight because he's the workaholic. But, you know, dad's cool with the girlfriend and mom isn't. You know, but here's this kid with this choice of whose side do I choose, you know, and how conniving his father was at, you know, like beating his wife at her own game, kind of, and like subversively, you know, just tricking him into doing what he thought was right, you know. And what's funny is that if he hadn't killed her, she probably would have ran off, just like how he told the cops that she did. You know, he knew his wife so well that he could even come up with a story of why she would have done it. You know, and I really liked that. I thought that was interesting. And Stephen King's been married for such a long time that he probably, he has so much to talk about marriage because he's experienced it, So, but I mean, I don't, but you do.
Yeah, absolutely, I do, and yeah, so that's definitely, it's different. This is a very, it doesn't seem like a Stephen King adaptation to me, Axe. It really doesn't. But that being said, I definitely enjoyed it. I thought it was, it's for me. I think it's somewhere in the middle of the pack of his, adaptations. I don't think there's, like, I don't think it's in the top 10 or anything.
No.
But it's definitely, even comparing it to the films that we have talked about tonight or today on the show, I definitely think you can compare this to a film even like Silver Bullet, as far as how good it is. So I'm gonna start us off real quick here, Axe, and I'm gonna say that 1922 is gonna get 3 blood drops from me.
Well, I mean, I definitely like aspects of this movie. I think it's like it's really long and drawn out for a lot of it, and then all of a sudden, like, when it becomes the whole Bonnie and Clyde story with the son and the girlfriend, like, all of a sudden it's just going super fast. Like, everything is just whipping by super fast, and like the whole rest of the movie took forever, and now all this shit's happening in 5 minutes. And so I kind of really felt like the end was super rushed. And but I did like that one line, she told me secrets that only a dead woman could know. That was a good line, wasn't
Definitely.
it?
Yep.
And we all get caught in the end. That was a good one too. But to me, it's the story is just not very. It's not super compelling, and like, even though it's got beauty to it in the way that it's shot and some of the scenes, I'm gonna go a little less on this one, man. I'm gonna go 2.5.
Okay.
To me, I love vampires and werewolves, and so that automatically kind of, I'm gonna give those a little bit more, just because I love vampires and werewolves. But this story, it's like, it's just a mean old dude that did some shitty stuff, and it's like, it doesn't have a lot of supernaturalness other than, it's his own mind playing tricks on him with the ghosts and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's just sort of a run-of-the-mill kind of murder story to me.
You think it's kind of lacking some of that King magic?
Yeah.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna stick with my 3, but so Axe is gonna go 2.5 on this. So we'll do a quick recap and then we'll wrap things up here, Axe. So Silver Bullet from 1985, we both went 3 blood drops on that. The Night Flyer from 1997, I went 3.5. Axe went 3 on that. And The Dark Half, definitely the star of our 4 film review this week for sure. Axe and I both agreed 4 blood drops out of 5 for 1993's The Dark Half from George A. Romero. And 1922 from 2017 from Zach Hilditch. Axe goes 2.5 and I go 3 blood drops on that. So that's just about going to wrap things up. But before we wrap things up, we got to shamelessly plug some of our stuff here. Be on the lookout, X, because we've talked about doing a short film together with some of the guys from the Ghoul Cast, which by the time this is out, the other episode will be out. So please check that out. We do a cool crossover episode with the Ghoul Cast where we talk about horror franchises. So if you haven't listened to that, check it out. So we're talking about doing that. We also have a website, Axe. We have a website where we do reviews. And ironically enough, Axe is hopefully going to have some more reviews at some point up there. But ironically enough, one of Axe's reviews is a Stephen King film. And that is It Chapter 2. So if you get a chance to check it out, it's at horrorreview.com. We post new things almost every week, almost every day, every other day, 3 to 4 times a week. horrorreviewed.com. And as always, if you like what you're listening to, hit that bell icon, subscribe, and for the Jeff and Axe Horror Show, I'm Jeff.
I'm Max.
And we will catch you next time.